Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to look at 7 different ways to harmonise 3 notes. Furthermore, in each case the first chord is going to be the same. So can there be 7 different ways to start on chord 1 on the tonic chord and go to another chord that fits what we've got? Why are we doing this? Well, it's good to be able to think when you're harmonising something, what are my options? Do I want something that's fairly straightforward? Do I want something that's a bit more colourful? What is it? What's the vibe that I'm looking for in this particular context? Also, as a composer, quite often you have a little idea that's going to come back many times during the course of your piece. And it can get a bit tedious if it comes back and you think, oh, here it is again. So one thing you can do is to keep representing the same little idea or motif, but to present it with different harmony between one representation and another to give it a different flavour. So first of all, what's the 3-note motif? Well, we've got it here on the screen, and it's simply this. 3 notes, C, D, E. It's not the most exciting musical idea, is it? But that's the point of this. How can we do something with something that's not over exciting, very simple, very short? When you look at it, you might already decide, well, I need a chord that goes with this note, and I need a chord that goes with this note, and probably this note is going to be a passing note or a passing tone, simply because it's coming between the beats. You could have one chord here, one chord here, one chord there, but that's going to give us what we call a fast harmonic rhythm. In other words, the chords are going to change very quickly between quavers or eighth notes, and we're going to have chord, 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 which could be a little bit oppressive. So the idea of having one chord on this note, having the second chord on that note, and simply allowing this one to pass in between is definitely going to give us a better flow. It's going to make it sound less manic than having 3 chords. Let's just demonstrate that. If I go 3 chords, it doesn't sound wrong, does it? But it's fast. You hear that the chord change is very fast. It has a fast harmonic rhythm. If I do this, actually that feels a bit better paced, doesn't it? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to treat the 3-note figure in the same way for 7 different examples. We're going to harmonise the first note, we're going to harmonise the third note, we're going to treat the middle note as a passing, and we're always going to start on chord 1. So I'm really limiting the scope here just so we can explore different possibilities. Okay, well, what could we do? Well, one thing we could do is simply go 1 to 1. That may seem like the most boring thing possible. But you notice one thing I'm doing here is leaping the bass an octave. So I could go C, C, or C, C, but if I go C, C, it's one way of creating some kind of movement forwards, even though the chord hasn't changed. So, you know, what could I do? Let's just fill in the middle parts with, I don't know, something like this. So we've now got 4 parts going. So what you hear there is you've got the 2 chords that are identical, but there's some sense of movement because we elevate all the parts between the first chord and the second chord, even though they are both chord 1 or a chord of C. Okay, so that's one thing you could do. Well, how about if we do something like go from 1 to 6? And let's think about why we might want to do that. My point being this: when you look at this second note, this third note of the 3-note group, the second chord, E is the root of something, it's the third of something, and it's the fifth of something. It will also be the 7th of a 7th chord. It will also be the 9th of a 9th chord. So it's really about looking at that E and thinking, what are my options? So we've talked about going from 1 to 1, but because obviously that E is the third of chord 1, but E is also the fifth of chord 6. So I can go from 1 to 6 and be fairly confident that's going to work. If I wanted to put in the middle parts now, I'm probably going to do something like this. So we did 1 to 1. Now I'm going 1 to 6. You can hear immediately it has a different flavour, partly because the chord's changed, partly because now we've gone from a major chord to a minor chord. You'll notice in this example I've started the bass in the upper octave to go down to A. That's partly because often it's kind of helpful to have contrary motion between the outer parts, and that sometimes helps you not to get into trouble with consecutives or parallels. But also the bass leaping an octave tends to work perfectly well. If I had the bass leaping from this C upper 6, there's nothing wrong with that, but perhaps it's slightly smoother to fall a third than to rise a 6. So I could have started on the lower C, bum, but maybe it's slightly smoother to go ma, di. You know, no big deal about that, but just to show you the reasoning behind what I've done there. So 1 to 1, 1 to 6. Well, what else could we do? How about doing this? Here's another sort of slightly colourful possibility. That we start with 1 again, and this time we go to 4, 7. Oh, now how does that work? Well, chord 4 in C major is F, A, C. Stick a 7th on it. You've now got the E, haven't you? So if I put the other parts in, they might read something like this. And what's happening now? This is 1 going to 4, 7. Now you can hear that's a kind of different kind of sound, isn't it? 1 to 1 was pretty straightforward. 1 to 6 felt a little bit different because we were going major to minor. But now we're going from 1 to an extended chord in 4, 7. It's kind of a slightly more expressive feel to it. It might not work in the style in which you want to present things, but don't forget this possibility of extended chords using your 7ths and so on. Okay, well, on that basis, what about this? By the way, I could have started this one on the lower C and gone C, F or C, F. It doesn't really matter too much in that case. Again, I'm sort of thinking the contramotion between the top and the bottom is quite a nice thing to have when it's feasible, but not a big deal. How about we do something like this and we go 1 to 2, 9. So that'll give me C, D. And now it does make sense to have the 2 bass notes next door to each other rather than go C, D and have a big leap. So I'm going to go for that. The middle parts might read something like this to complete my chords. That's a C there. So what does that sound like? 1 to 2, 9. That's another kind of quite colourful, rich situation. Sounds totally different from those earlier examples, doesn't it? So you see what I mean? Getting colour into harmonising the same group of notes. What about this? If I do something very similar to the one I've just done, but this time we go 1, but this time I'm going to call it 5, 9 of 5. Okay, let's just think about what that means. So a dominant 9th chord again, but of 5. So we're in C major. So 5 is G major. So what's 5, 9 in G major? It's D, F sharp, A, C, E. So when I harmonise this, let's just get all these parts in. It might sound something like this. Okay. That's giving us a bit of chromatic colour. I'm in C major, but the F sharp has given me a flavour of the dominant key. What's interesting about this is you'll notice that the example I've just given you here, ending on this 5, 9 of 5, is actually a sort of corruption of this 2, 9 in the previous example, because the only thing that's changed is that this F sharp is here instead of this F natural. So when I go 1 to 2, 9, it goes like this. Lovely sound. When I go 1 to 5, 9 of 5, you get a different kind of colour, don't you? So it's just a nuance that changes things. So, you know, we're getting a little bit more complicated with it now using these extended chords, but it's another way to give yourself colour. Okay, let's move on to option 6. Well, this time I'm going to suggest that we go from 1 to 5/13. So thinking about extended chords again, can we use a dominant 13th there? Because if you think about it, what's the dominant chord in C? It's G, B, D. Let's extend it. F is the 7th, A is the 9th, C is the 11th, E is the 13th. So that's what's going on there. So does that give us a different kind of colour? So we're not doing anything chromatic now. We're staying within the diatonic framework of the key. But how does it sound with a dominant 13th in place? Different kind of sound, isn't it? Probably feels like it wants to go on somewhere else. Something like that maybe. But there we are. It's another possibility. Or what about this one? Here's option number 7 on offer today. These are not exhaustive. I mean, there are further things that you could do if you wanted to do. But here's going to 5/7 of 6. Oh, okay, so how does that work? What's 6 in relation to C major? That's A minor. Okay, so I'm using the dominant 7th of A minor. So what am I going to do here? Is another one that's going to need a little chromatic touch. So if I use that G sharp there, that will go very nicely. So 1 to 5/7 of 6. You can hear that's giving us another colour, isn't it? Hopefully you get the idea anyway, and that this video is a way of just kind of building confidence with exploring different possibilities. I've made it entirely restrictive to kind of make this point really. Just 3 notes, treating one as a passing note or a passing tone. C and E both belong to chord 1. So you might be thinking there, every time this 3-note thing comes about, I could just use chord 1. Well, you could. But actually, if you're looking for other possibilities, well, look what we've got. 1 to 1. 1 to 6. Sounds very different. 1 to 4/7. Expressive. 1 to 2/9. Nice and colourful. 1 to 5/9 of 5. That's a cheeky one, isn't it? With that F sharp in there. 1 to 5/13. And then 1 to 5/7 of 6. So you can imagine if that 3-note figure were to keep representing itself throughout your piece, and you had all these possible ways of harmonising it, it would inject much more colour, much more variety into what you were writing. It would make the repetition of that 3-note motif far less predictable, because the listener would hear it melodically but wonder what was happening harmonically. So that's the purpose of this, just to make you think, what are my options when I'm doing something with a very simple musical idea? Well, I hope that's been useful. And if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you on a little tour of the Music Matters website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. And in particular, have a look at Maestros. Maestros is a wonderful opportunity to really extend your musical development. Maestros comes with all sorts of perks. And don't feel you've got to be somebody highly knowledgeable or highly experienced musically. People of all levels are welcome. So level 1 is a kind of engagement level. You get early access videos, there's emojis, various things that are going on there. When you get to level 2, there are more perks, including the opportunity to attend a monthly live stream where I do a kind of hour teaching, and it's a great opportunity to learn. There's a live chat running, you can ask questions, you can make comments, you can sit passively and just let it float over you, or just learn without engaging with the other people, but you can feel free to do that if you want to. Lots of people come on those and really value it. Then there's level 3, where it's a members workshop, so you can present your own work, your own composition, your own performance of something recorded possibly, so that we can kind of all listen to that in the live stream. You can get sort of thoughts from other people within the group, always very supportive, by the way. And also I give you a kind of evaluation, a written evaluation of what you're doing there. So a lot of people find that really helpful. The other thing to say about Maestros is if you sign up as a level 2 or a level 3 member, you immediately have access to all of the previous live streams that we've ever done. We're talking about that's access to well over 100 previous live streams that is just full of content. So you might want to look through the list of that and think, wow, there's a whole load of stuff here that I could watch and learn from. So have a look at Maestros in particular, www.mmcourses.co.uk.